Atonement is the underlying theme of the Old Testament. In fact, the word is mentioned a whole 112 times in the book. So, what exactly is atonement? There are 3 official dictionary definitions for the word: reparation for a wrong or injury, reparation or expiation for sin, and the reconciliation of God and humankind through Jesus Christ. However, none of these definitions are specific enough to bring across the true meaning of the word, not to mention that its precise definition is still a subject of debate. In English, the word can be broken up into its 3 syllables, forming the incomplete phrase, at one ment. Some people look at this dissection of the word and conclude that it means the act of mending the spiritual relationship so that God and humanity can relationally be at one again. Essentially, reconciliation. Another interpretation is from the original Hebrew word kafar, although biblical scholars decided to replace the word with atonement in the English translation. The word's literal meaning is to cover. Thus, many biblical scholars agree that the true meaning of atonement is the covering of sin, so that God no longer will see it. In the Old Testament, atonement takes the form of animal sacrifices and are a part of daily Jewish life. Exodus 29, for example, describes a Jewish ritual of offering 2 male lambs every day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Numbers 28 mentions a monthly animal sacrifice on top of the previously mentioned daily offering, with 2 bulls, a ram, and 7 lambs. Why were the people in the Old Testament atoning through the sacrifice of animals? Well, since this was before the coming of Jesus Christ, the Old Testament, the sins of man had to be regularly atoned, and the continuous spilling of innocent blood was necessary for humankind to maintain a relationship with God, since God is so holy, he cannot stand any sin. Although God's justice required that sin have a penalty, he was a merciful God who allowed the sacrifice to be substituted with an innocent animal's blood. The theological concept of atonement is mentioned even in the very beginning of the Bible. So let's go back to the Genesis, when Adam and Eve committed the first sin by eating the forbidden fruit. Adam and Eve hid from God in shame, so God provided them animal skins to cover their nakedness. Providing clothing made of animal hides necessitated the death of an animal, since obviously you cannot shed off a beast's skin without killing it first. Thus, an innocent animal shed its blood on Adam and Eve's behalf. This is the Bible's very first representation of atonement. Later on in the Exodus, the people are atoned through the Mosaic covenant and once again through the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur, mentioned in the Leviticus. So, how does this concept of atonement connect with the New Testament? At first glance, there may seem to be no connection at all between the 2 books, since the precise word atonement does not appear a single time in the New Testament. However, from a Christian point of view, Jesus Christ was the ultimate atonement for all of mankind. Let's look a little more into detail at the correlation between the Old Testament atonement rituals and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. In the Old Testament, there was always the involvement of an innocent animal receiving the punishment for the sinner by its own death. Jesus Christ, likewise, willingly became the sacrifice to shed his absolutely sinless blood and receive the punishment for the sinful humankind. In other words, Jesus Christ, was the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate atonement, and the Old Testament atonement rituals were an indirect prophecy and representation of his death, at least from a Christian perspective. Followers of Judaism think otherwise. Unlike Christians, who believe that the core of atonement is the fact that Jesus shed his blood for humankind, Jews disagree that Jesus Christ was the ultimate atonement. They do believe in the concept of atonement because they celebrate Yom Kippur, also known as the Day of Atonement. Judaism, however, insists that Jesus Christ was nobody beyond a devoted prophet who died for his belief, which means their sins have not been ultimately atoned by anybody. That's why Jews tend to engage in rituals similar to the ones shown in the Old Testament, since they believe their sins still need to be constantly atoned in order to maintain a relationship with God. To sum it up, the Christians believe that there is a significant connection of atonement between the Old Testament and the New Testament due to the crucifixion, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. On the other hand, Jews reject the connection since they do not believe that Jesus Christ was the ultimate atonement. However, they certainly do believe that there will be a Messiah sometime in the future. This means that in the end, both of these seemingly contrasting views agree that the concept of atonement does not stop at the Old Testament, but stretches out much further.